seat, please.
So you're getting this?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Looks like we might need another minute or two.
All right, we're back on. All the defendants present, represented by counsel. I do want to make a clarification because the way, Mr. Rubin, you joined that last motion made me think that maybe I was misunderstood. The sheriff isn't going and talking to the jury. What I've asked the bailiff to ensure is that the jury understands that if there are any issues with the court's instructions, that they send a note so that I can go ahead and see what the issue is and then bring it to counsel's attention. So I just want to make sure everybody understands that, because that the way it was couched was as if I was having the sheriff go and affirmatively go and speak with the panel. And that's just not what I'm talking about. It's the bailiff ensuring that they understand the court's instructions as we go through the trial, just so that if there is an issue, it's brought to my attention.
I understand, Your Honor. If I misspoke, I apologize.
There's a finer issue there with.
Yeah.
Your Honor, we're waiting on Ms. Bird. If she's not here in a minute or two, I'll go check on her.
Your Honor, here's the issue, if I can say this. It's based on a case that we had several years ago, Lindsay versus the state, where the court asked the jury bailiff to answer a question that the jury had. So, and I understand that's an extension, and that was a reversed case. So what we wanted to do is to follow the law as we saw as an extension of that, and to make sure that, and while we have no there's not going to be any ill will, I don't want anything attributed to the sheriff's department or the bailiffs, but in our mind there is a difference between the court asking the jurors, has there been any inadvertent or intentional contact, whatever, on your part, or your son just forwarded you a article and you thought, oh my goodness, I thought it was pictures of the grandkids. So that's why we believed it would be sounder for the court to do it. We understand the ruling, but I wanted to make sure you understood why we see the distinction between the two.
No, that's fine. And just to be clear, if it is anything is brought to the bailiff's attention, it will come to me. Now, whether that, and I'll be clear about it. The way I've always functioned is anything comes to the bailiff is generally written down, and I know what it is, and we can mark it and discuss it. But that, as far as I'm concerned, anything that comes to the bailiff is brought to the court's attention, and if it's something we need to go ahead and discuss, we'll go ahead and discuss that. I'm just telling you that I want to make sure that the jury knows and understands that anything that needs to be brought to the court's attention with respect to the court's instructions is going to be done so. And we've spent a lot of time talking about it. I just, based on Mr. Rubin joining the motion, was concerned there had been a misunderstanding about what the court was doing. And that's all. And I understand the extension, and that's fine. We're on the record on it.
Would you put on the record for us what the court's instructions to the bailiff to say to the jury is?
I have no idea. Basically, let the jury know that if there are any issues having to do with the court's instructions, to let her know so that I can address them as quickly as I can with counsel. I mean, maybe that last part of it is my reading into it, but that's effectively it.
And the bailiff's instructions from the court is to ask that of the jury each morning?
I haven't done it each morning, no, but to make sure that they were aware of it, particularly this morning, because this morning it was on my mind. But again, the court's given them instructions. They are adults. They understand they're under the umbrella of the court, and they are being instructed at least twice a day that there are specific instructions with contact. I have I have great faith in the ability of the individuals that are tasked with listening to this case, with their ability to comply with the court's instructions. Most people, once they hear from a Superior Court judge about particular things, are usually going to comply, particularly when you see that judge every day. So if I feel like I need to repeat it, maybe I'll just let you all know that I've repeated it, but those were the instructions. All right, anything from the state before we continue?
Nothing from the state, Your Honor.
Anything from Travis McMichael?
No, Your Honor.
Anything from Gregory McMichael?
No, Your Honor.
From Mr. Bryan?
No, Your Honor.
All right, stay ready with this next witness.
Yes, we are, Your Honor.
All right, let's go get the panel.
All right, for the jury, please. Please be seated.
All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I understand we are ready to proceed with the evidence from the state.
At this time, the state will call Detective Parker Marcy.
Swear to tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I did.
Go ahead, have a seat.
All right, Detective, please state your, oh, you can take your mask off. All right, please state your name and spell it for the court reporter.
My name is Parker Marcy. M-A-R-C-Y is my last.
All right, and Detective, how are you currently employed?
I'm an investigator at the Glynn County Police Department.
All right, and how long have you been in law enforcement total?
10 years.
So tell us, have you always been with Glenn County?
Yes, ma'am.
So starting back 10 years ago, did you go to the academy, did you go to post, how'd you get trained?
I'm a post-certified officer. I went to Garden City, just north of Savannah, where Gypstick has a regional academy that I attended Band-Aid at.
All right, and that was 10 years ago.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so when you first started, what were your job duties and responsibilities with the Glenn County Police Department?
When I first started, I was a basic patrol officer, responding and answering calls for service and patrolling the zone.
All right, and when did you become a detective?
In 2015.
All right, so now, how does it work at the Glenn County Police Department as far as detectives go? Is there specialties or you do everything? Tell the jury about that.
As far as case assignments, we pretty much work everything. We don't have specific, crimes against persons, crimes against property divisions. We do have some specialties for training that may cost a bit of money to get into versus just being assigned a different case. I do video work as well as cell phone forensics.
Right. So when you say video work, are you kind of like the person who will go to the gas station and pull down the video of the armed robbery kind of thing?
Yes, ma'am. And then we have some software to try and clean up some images, as well as we can put video together.
All right. And then when you say you do cell phone stuff,
Yes, ma'am.
tell the jury what you mean by that.
We use primarily Cellbrite. It's a cell phone and overall now digital forensics company, and we can use their software and hardware to extract data from a multitude of devices most of them being cell phones.
Right. And you've had training in both those things?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So tell the jury what the duties and responsibilities usually of a detective are. What do you generally do? Like, are you in a patrol car? Do you call 911 calls? What happens?
Typically, we work a standard schedule, Monday to Friday, 8 to 4. With the exception of some call days, we come in a little bit later and stay later in case something comes out in the evening. Rotating call days, so if an incident happens during the evening or the weekend that requires an investigator to come out that's not on duty, that on-call investigator will come out. Other than that, we work cases that we either respond to, are called out to, and until their conclusion, or we're assigned cases to work until their conclusion.
All right. So is it more the case that you're assigned a case once a 911 call has come in and a patrol officer has responded?
Typically, yes, ma'am.
All right. Now, you're dressed in a suit today. Is that what you normally wear as a detective with the Glynn County Police Department?
No, ma'am.
What do you usually wear as a detective?
Currently, we have black polo shirts with our badge of office on our left chest and CID on our sleeves with green 511 pants. That's a new uniform. We previously wore with the same patch and emblem green polo shirt with tan 511 pants.
Based on that uniform, is it easy to identify you as a law enforcement officer?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And do you normally wear a body cam with that uniform?
Yes, ma'am.
So prior to February 23rd of 2020, had you ever worked a homicide case before?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Had you worked that as the lead or as an assist?
I've assisted in several, and I've been the lead on 3 cases.
How many other detectives are there in Glynn County that work homicides? I mean, normally on your shift. Or
All 7 of us.
7 of you. Okay. So there's 7 detectives to handle all the detective work in Glynn County.
For Glynn County PD. I'm not sure how many investigators the city of Brunswick currently has. That's our criminal investigative division, and we're a little shorthanded right now, so that's why it's that number.
Gotcha. All right. So I'm going to direct your attention specifically to the neighborhood of Satilla Shores. Are you familiar with Satilla Shores here in Glynn County?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And it's in Glynn County.
Yes, ma'am.
Prior to February 2020, had you ever worked the Satilla Shores neighborhood as a patrol officer?
Yes, ma'am, I have.
All right. But what years were those that you worked as a patrol officer in Satilla Shores?
Best recollection, 2013 to 15, and then some time, I believe in 2018, 19. Normally we ride the same zone, and that's all every exit 29 area, all that's considered one zone, but we'll move around on occasion.
So Baker 9.
Yes, ma'am, Baker 9.
All right. So prior to February of 2020, did you know William, who goes by Roddy, Bryan?
No, ma'am.
And prior to February of 2020, did you know Travis McMichael, seated right over there?
No, ma'am.
All right. And prior to February of 2020, did you know Greg McMichael?
I knew of Mr. McMichael from his employment at the district attorney's office here.
Had you ever worked a case with him?
Not that I recall. The only time I recall interactions is passing him one time in the district attorney's office upstairs. I don't recall if we had any interactions if he ever came to our headquarters.
All right. I'm going to direct your attention specifically to Sunday, February 23rd, 2020, approximately 1:15 in the afternoon. Were you working that day?
No, ma'am, I wasn't.
All right, so where were you?
I was at home.
All right, so what's your normal shift? I think as a detective, would you have been, it's a Sunday, so you're off.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so you're at home. What happens?
Whenever a major incident happens, our dispatch center will push out administrative pages. It's just a glorified text message, very basic information about something that's happened. I received one of those pages and called the sergeant, Sergeant Oliver on duty, and asked if she could use a hand.
And did she take you up on it?
Not initially.
Okay.
Yeah.
Eventually?
Yeah, eventually she agreed to let me come in and help out.
Okay. Did you respond to the scene at Holmes and Satilla?
No, ma'am.
Where did you go?
I went straight to our headquarters.
And what were you wearing that day?
The green polo and tan 511 pants that I mentioned.
Right. So when you got to the Glynn County Police Department headquarters, what was the first task that you kind of handled at that time?
Mr. Travis McMichael arrived with an officer. He was still in the clothes that he was wearing that day and covered with blood, and had a request to get it changed and cleaned up. I called down to the case agent, Investigator Lowry, and Sergeant Oliver was with him as well, and asked what's the status on that, if that's okay. They were good with him getting cleaned up, and so we took photographs of him as he was, and then collected the clothing he was wearing and allowed him to change.
Okay, so Travis McMichael came to headquarters. How did he get there?
Officer Lewis brought him up in his patrol car.
Okay. And where was Gregory McMichael at this time?
As far as I didn't know at that time. He later showed up in our lobby.
Okay. And when he showed up in the lobby, how was he dressed?
He had on a light blue fishing polo, blue jeans, and sandals.
All right. And at the time Travis McMichael showed up, did Mr. Bryan show up at that time as well?
I don't recall when he showed up.
All right. So Travis McMichael, did you want to take some photos at that time?
Yes, ma'am.
And were photos actually taken?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Prior to coming in today, did you have the opportunity to review State's Exhibit 237 through 265?
Yes, ma'am.
Were they fair and accurate pictures of Travis McMichael as he was as he came in, and then later cleaned up?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. At this time, the state would tender into evidence States 237 through 265.
No objection. No objection.
No objection.
They're admitted.
So States 237. What's the state? What are we looking at here?
This is a bathroom just outside of the interview rooms, and this is Mr. Travis McMichael as he showed up.
And so we have, for instance, States 238. Were these a series of photos to capture his head to foot condition from the crime scene as he was transported then to Glynn County headquarters?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So 238 is his left arm.
Yes, ma'am.
239 his right arm.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. What are we looking at in 240?
Boots and blue jeans from his knees.
241,
Waistline with his hands.
242,
Chest.
243,
Back of his head and shoulders.
244,
Same.
245,
More of his torso and his upper back.
246. What's the jury looking at here?
This is his right arm from the side.
247,
A little more turned to the front with his right arm and an abdomen.
248,
His hands and forearms.
249,
More specific on his hands.
250,
His left hand and wrist.
251,
Right hand and wrist.
252,
The underside of his left hand and forearm.
253.
Same for his right hand and forearm.
All right, so at any point in time, did he ask for medical attention for any injury or broken skin?
He asked for an alcohol swab That was it.
An alcohol swab?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. But like, he didn't need stitches?
No, ma'am.
Didn't have any lumps or contusions or broken skin?
Object to the leading questions, Your Honor.
It's sustained as leading. It's just asking if you just.
Did he have any major injuries that needed medical attention?
No, ma'am.
So then looking at 254, what's the jury looking at here?
This is the right side of Travis McMichael after being cleaned up and changed. Right side of his head.
255.
The back of his head.
And do you have any idea if that is still an abrasion or if that's leftover blood that just didn't come off?
I don't know, ma'am.
What are we looking at with 256?
The left side of his head.
What's the jury looking at in 257?
His face with the scale.
Does he have any bruises?
He's got a little reddening of the cheeks. Past that, none that I recall are standing out to me here now.
258. What's the jury looking at there?
Left side of his head with the scale.
260. What's the jury looking at there?
Right side of his head with the scale.
261. What's the jury looking at here?
His forearms.
And when we look here at 262, do you have any idea if that's an abrasion or if that's just blood that didn't come off?
I believe it was actually an abrasion. I don't,
Do you want me to bring it to you?
no, I can say I believe it was an abrasion. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then 263, what are we looking at there?
That's his right forearm. I believe we took a picture of that with a discoloration. I don't remember if we actually noted a cut on that.
And 264,
That's his left forearm, flipped over, showing the bottom of his forearm.
All right, at this point in time, after taking these pictures, you said you encountered Greg McMichael in the lobby. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, what happened next?
Brought him back to our interview rooms and conducted an interview with him.
What time did you start your interview with Greg McMichael?
It's about 3:17 in the afternoon.
And was this interview captured on video?
Yes, ma'am.
And have you reviewed that video interview?
Yes, ma'am.
And was it fair and accurate?
Yes, ma'am.
Anything deleted out of it? Anything added to it?
No, ma'am.
All right. And have you reviewed the transcript of that interview with Greg McMichael?
Yes, ma'am.
Was that transcript a fair and accurate reproduction of the interview you conducted with Greg McMichael?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. At this time, the state will tender into evidence States 225, the video of your interview with Greg McMichael at 3:17 p.m. on February 23rd, 2020, and States Exhibit 225A, the transcript, once again, into the record. And it won't go out with the jury because the jury will not be able to play it in the back.
No objection.
No objection.
No objection.
They're admitted.
So, Detective, I'm going to hand you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 225. You gotta watch the microphone. There you go, sir. All right, so what we're going to do right now, Detective Marcy, is we're going to go through what Greg McMichael said about what Greg McMichael did on February 23rd, 2020.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So what I'm going to do first off is I'm going to generally direct you to page 4. And I'm going to talk to you here about whether he had known Mr. Bryan previously.
Yes, ma'am. He said he did. He said that he's known Robbie Bryan for years, that he's a mechanic who works at Southern Hardware now. He does small gas engine repair and lives in the neighborhood, but he wasn't exactly sure where he lives in the neighborhood.
All right. And where did Greg McMichael tell you he lived?
At 230 Satilla Drive.
So I'm going to direct your attention now to page 6. All right, now with regard to page 6, into, I think, page 7, I'm going to go ahead and have you specifically give a quote so that the jury has this verbatim, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
So first off, let's take a look at page 6, lines 17 through 20. What did Greg McMichael say had happened that day, or what was he doing that day?
I'm quoting him. He said, "And I was out. I had my truck pulled up, backed up to the edge of my garage. I'm reupholstering the seat cushions on my boat. And I was using more or less the bed as a workbench."
Okay, so then continuing on that page, what did he say at lines 22 through 25?
I'll quote him again. "So I'm saying I'm spraying glue down and putting the padding down and all that kind of stuff. It was, I don't know exactly at what point of, the construction I was at that particular time, but I look up and I see this guy hauling ass."
All right, so at this point in time, what does he say about this guy hauling ass?
He said, I'll continue the quote, "I'm not talking about a jog. I'm talking about a haul ass, like something's right on his ass chasing him."
All right, so I'm now going to direct you from lines 4 through 13, okay? So what did he say about being able to recognize this person, lines 4 through 13?
He had seen 2 to 3 prior videos that Diego Perez had provided to him or shown him. He uses the words of this guy breaking into or being or wandering around into this house that's it's under construction.
All right, so I'm going to stop you there. How many videos did he say he'd seen?
2 to 3.
2 to 3 videos.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And he was shown these videos by who?
Diego Perez.
All right. And he described it as this guy doing what?
He used the words breaking into or being or wandering around into this house.
And this is a house that's under construction.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, with regard to the guy that owns it, what's he talk about the guy that owns it, line 8 through 13? Go ahead and give it to us verbatim.
Quoting the guy that owns it, "I guess he's doing it himself because it's been in that state with no doors, no windows on it for well over a year now. I think the guy's a banker in Alma, and this is his second, or it's like a vacation home for him, but he's in no rush to build it."
All right, so did you then ask him, I'm going to take that question back. Hold on. I'm going to pivot on you for a second. I'm going to go ahead and have you then move forward to pages 13 through 14. So on pages 13 through 14, do we now pick up back where he's talking about what he did after he's seen the black guy running down the street?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I'm going to have you do this. We are going to do lines 21 through 25 on page 13, starting with, "Well, I'm thinking."
I'll be quoting him. He says, "Well, I'm thinking he's either done something to somebody's chasing him, or I thought, well, maybe somebody drove up and found him in their house, or drove up to that particular house he likes to go into over and over again."
So He doesn't tell you he specifically saw him commit a crime that day.
Correct.
And going to the next page, 14, line 3, what's he do?
He runs inside of his house and
Okay.
retrieves a
Runs inside of his house. Okay. And what did he retrieve?
.357 Magnum.
All right. I'm going to direct your attention now to page 24. So, with regard to page 24, does he talk to you about how he was able to recognize or think he recognizes Mr. Arbery as the guy from the construction house?
Yes, ma'am, it does.
All right, so I'm going to have you specifically start on line 1.
He refers to Mr. Diego Garcia again, and he tells me that...
You mean Mr. Diego Perez?
I'm sorry, thank you. Diego Perez.
Okay.
And he, Mr. Perez shows Mr. Greg McMichael what the guy looks like using video.
Actually, what I'm going to have you do is I want you to go ahead and just give it to him verbatim, starting at line 1
Okay.
through line 8, okay?
Quoting, Mr. McMichael says yes, and he shows me what the guy looks like because I had never seen him. So I had heard a description of him, or maybe I had seen him. Maybe I had seen him before he moved to Diego's. I don't really remember exactly. But nonetheless, he had a video that night. He said, take a look at this, and you can see the guy. He's, roaming around in there.
Okay. And then what did you ask?
I asked him if the individual was picking up anything or going through anything.
And specifically, what did he say? Go ahead and quote it for us. Line 11 through 15.
He says, and I'm quoting, not that I recall, I don't think the guy has actually stolen anything out of there, or if he did, it was early in this process. But he keeps going back there over and over and over again to this damn house.
All right, so when you're asking him, was he picking up anything or going through anything, are you talking about that day or are you talking about what he'd seen on the videos?
What he had seen on the videos.
Okay. And he says he doesn't recall seeing him ever steal anything or pick anything up.
Correct.
All right. And he said, I don't think the guy's actually stolen anything out of there. Is that what he tells you?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And
Your Honor, that was an incomplete question, and I would ask that the state, if she's asking the witness to reiterate the testimony that he's already given, which is her right to do, that she state it accurately.
Sure, it can be cleaned up on cross. Allowed, just can be cleaned up. Go ahead.
thank you. So, and then did he go on to say, if he did, it was early on in this process?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so if he did, was he able to tell you that he had personal knowledge of any prior theft that Mr. Arbery had committed at the open construction site? I mean, right there, it says if he did. Did he give you details?
No, ma'am, he did not.
Okay. Did he give you dates?
No, ma'am, he did not.
Did he talk at all about a boat and stuff being stolen off a boat at any point in time?
No, ma'am.
All right, so I'm going to direct your attention now specifically to, let's go to page 24. Oh, I'm sorry. No wonder it's not working for me. Let's go to page 28. All right. Now, at this point in time, the top of page 28, are you trying to have him clarify some stuff for you?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So, where did he say he ran?
Into his residence.
All right. And what did he get out?
A .357 Magnum.
All right. And he did, I'm going to take you to the bottom of page 30 now. Once he ran to the house and got his gun, he went to the truck.
Yes, ma'am.
What did he say the problem with the truck was?
His grandson's car seat is in the passenger side of the truck.
And turning the page to page 31, starting at line 2. But anyway.
He said, I'll quote him, but anyway, it's strapped in. It's a beast to get in and out, processing. So I just opened up, sitting up on top of this car seat like this, my head, I'm looking down like this through the windshield.
And does he indicate where the truck now goes?
Yes, ma'am.
And it goes down to the corner, and where does it go after that?
Mentions it goes down to the corner of Burford Road.
Okay. And why do they go down to Burford Road, based on lines 14 and 15 of page 31?
He says Burford, that's where he is. He's going down, he's running down Burford.
All right, so I'm going to specifically take you to the top of page 32. Okay? All right, so at this point in time, generally, does Gregory McMichael indicate to you that Mr. Arbery's on the left-hand side of the road?
Yes, ma'am.
And is Mr. Gregory McMichael indicating whether he's yelling at Mr. Arbery?
Yes, ma'am.
What's he yelling at Mr. Arbery?
Stop, 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 stop.
All right. And then, what's he say that Mr. Arbery does on line 3?
Line 3, he says that Mr. Arbery puts it in high gear.
Okay. And what did Mr. Gregory McMichael say at that point once Mr. Arbery put it in high gear?
He stated to cut him off 3 times.
All right. And he just said, I said, cut him off, cut him off, cut him off.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And what did he say the guy did next?
Mr. Arbery started running back the other way.
Well, did he turn around first?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Turn around first and start running back the other way.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Now, at this point, does Mr. McMichael indicate that where he is as far as being in the truck, out of the truck, or anything like that, according to line 17 and 18?
He's out of the truck on foot. He was heading the same direction Mr. Arbery was now heading.
All right. So at this point, when the guy turns around and runs back the other way on Burford, Mr. Greg McMichael's out of that truck and he's headed back down that way on foot.
Yes, ma'am.
So at some point, does he decide to get back in the white pickup truck?
Yes, ma'am.
And so what does he say specifically, lines 19 through 22?
He says, quoting, so I'm not getting back in that front seat, the car seat. So I jumped to the back. I don't jump anywhere.
He doesn't jump anywhere.
No.
So what does he say he did next?
So he says, and quote, continuing the quote from there, okay, so I crawled my old cripple ass up into the back of the truck, and I can still see the guy down there.
All right. So by the time he gets back in the truck, he can still see Mr. Arbery down there.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So taking you to page 33, I'm going to go ahead on page 33 and have you start about midway where you're talking about being on Zellwood. So you're talking to Mr. Gregory McMichael about, we're coming up on Zellwood.
Yes, ma'am.
What does he say?
He confirms that, yes, Zellwood.
And then where did he say they went?
They went down Holmes Road.
All right. And did he indicate why they went down Holmes Road?
He mentions that he turned down, Mr. Arbery turned down Holmes Road.
Okay. And at some point, does he indicate whether Mr. Arbery sees them?
Yes, ma'am.
And once he sees them, what does Mr. Arbery do?
He turned and started running back. He uses the words that way.
All right. And then does he tell you where that is, back toward where?
He indicates the intersection of back towards this intersection.
Does he actually say what intersection at that point?
No, ma'am, he doesn't right at this point.
He just says intersection.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Page 33. All right, so I'm actually going to have you give the jury the specific quotes on line 20 through 22 that Greg McMichael says. Okay? And what I want is, does he first indicate the guy? Let me think. The guy is, he sees Mr. McMichael. And then does he say at some point, he, meaning the guy, turns and starts running back that way?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So going to page 34 now. Did you ask Mr. McMichael where Mr. McMichael tried to pin Mr. Arbery the first time?
Yes, ma'am.
Where did he indicate he tried to pin Mr. Arbery the first time?
On Burford Road.
All right. Now, going to page 35. As they're on Holmes Road, where is Mr. Greg McMichael? Line 21.
He says that he is in the back of the truck with the 357.
All right. Now, specifically, on Holmes Road, in the back of the truck with the 357, he then says specifically, I want you to quote this, line 25 into the top of line 1 and 2 on page 36. What does he specifically say?
Quoting, he says, I said, stop, you know, I'll blow your fucking head off or something. I was trying to convey to this guy we were not playing, you know.
Okay. Now, does he specifically indicate at what point he says this to Mr. Arbery?
No, ma'am.
All right, so you don't know where on Holmes Road it is that he says this to Mr. Arbery?
No, ma'am.
Going now to page 39. All right, so I'm going to talk to you now about what Mr. Greg McMichael says happens next. I'm going to direct your attention to lines 2 through 7 of page 39.
Okay.
All right, so once again, he's in the back of the truck with his weapon. What does he say he's doing?
He says that he's aiming.
Did he shoot?
No, ma'am.
And after he heard the shots were fired, how many shots did he say were fired?
He mentions 2.
And what did he do next?
He gets out of the truck. He stated that he had a hip replacement so he doesn't jump anywhere, that he eased himself out of the truck.
All right. So this is a man with a hip replacement, and so he had to ease himself out of the truck. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And at this point in time, did he indicate that he went and checked Mr. Arbery for a weapon?
Yes, ma'am.
Now directing your attention to page 41. Did Mr. McMichael indicate whether he had his cell phone with him?
He did not.
All right.
He stated he did not.
All right, but he did call 911.
Yes, ma'am.
Whose phone did he have to
He
use?
used Travis McMichael's phone.
So specifically then directing your attention to page 42. At this point in the interview, did you really start to talk to him about what was his intent with Mr. Arbery should he have actually stopped?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And what was his intent?
He said to hold him.
To hold him.
Yes, ma'am.
Did he use the word arrest?
No, ma'am.
Did he tell you what he was going to be arrested for?
No, ma'am.
Did he use the word citizen's arrest?
No, ma'am.
Did he use the word detain?
No, ma'am.
So he's holding him. Did he tell you what he was going to hold him for?
He was going to contact the county police.
Okay, and do what?
He was going to hold him for county police so that he could either be arrested or identified.
All right, I'm going to back you up for a minute. Specifically, line 24 through 25. I'm going to actually take you up to line 21. I want you to read that quote to the jury.
He says, and I quote, "Yeah, to hold him till you know and call county police to." I said, "Okay." He continues to come and check him out.
Check him out?
Yes,
Come
ma'am.
and check him out? That's what he says?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So he's calling to have the county police come and check him out. And then what does he say?
Continuing quote, there was no doubt in my mind as to who this guy was, none, having seen the videos prior.
All right, so having seen the videos, he's making this identification of this man.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Now, what else is he then talking to you about? The next thing that he's trying to explain his intent to you about.
I'll continue the quote from there. The thing that was not doubtful, but was certainly a driving factor in my mind, was that my son had a missing pistol, and I'm pretty certain this guy, well, I don't know for a fact, and I have no reason to think that he did it, other than the fact that this guy's been doing this crap over and over and over.
Okay, so he's talking about his son, Travis McMichael, has a missing pistol.
Yes, ma'am.
And then he's trying to tell you, I'm pretty certain this guy, but I don't know for a fact that he's the one who stole it.
Yes, ma'am.
That's what he's trying to tell you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. But he doesn't have any evidence to present to you that Mr. Arbery is the one who stole Travis McMichael's handgun.
Correct.
Actually, no, that's a mischaracterization.
Providing statements to the officer about it.
Let's just let the transcript speak for itself. It's a statement.
Did he say, I don't know for a fact?
Yes, ma'am.
Did they then say, I have no reason to think that he did it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Other than the fact that he's been doing this crap over and over and over.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. In fact, when he goes down to line 17 through 21, what does he say about Travis McMichael's stolen handgun at that point?
He says, and quoting, "Yeah, I had never seen this guy personally before and didn't see anybody go to the truck that day and take his weapon."
Okay. So going to the truck and taking the weapon, is that Travis McMichael's handgun?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so Greg McMichael is talking about with you a lot of different crimes that he suspects Mr. Arbery had committed, right?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Did he provide you with any specific details about the names, the addresses, the locations of these crimes?
No, ma'am.
All right. But did he talk about break-ins?
Yes, ma'am.
Did he throw around the word burglaries?
Yes, ma'am. You mentioned burglars, yeah.
All right. Did he throw around like entering autos or doing stuff like that?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Did I ask you to go back and look at all of the 911 calls into the Satilla Shores neighborhood from January 1st of 2019 through February 23rd of 2020?
Yes, ma'am. I think it actually looked into a little bit further into 2020. Let's see. It was from, the dates that I looked at were 1/1 of 2019 to 5/25 of 20.
All right, so what I'm going to have you do is only focus on 1/1 of 19 through February 23rd of 2020, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so how many burglary calls for 911 came into the Satilla Shores neighborhood?
Object, because this is calling for hearsay. She's asking him to report what he learned through other calls and documents, and the subject matter of those, and the determinations of those. That's all hearsay. There should be witnesses for those documents. He didn't have anything to do with these things.
So a foundation of what he's done and where to.
Sure thing. So, detective, which organization do you work for? All right, and you were a detective who worked on this case, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, you interviewed Greg McMichael, that's correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, and Greg McMichael had a claim that there was burglaries and entering autos and all this stuff, and he suspected Mr. Arbery.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. When I asked you to go ahead and review this information, how did you get this particular information I asked you to review?
I received the original list of incidents from the area from our conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I went into our reporting system, Spillman, and I pulled it again, and then exported just the general list of case numbers, dates, and natures into Excel, and started looking at case counts. Then went back into Spillman and pulled the same range, but it was only incidents that an actual report had been taken. So versus somebody calling in, an officer responding and clearing up, they help somebody out or something that doesn't require an actual written report versus they actually went back and we were required to document something. I pulled both lists.
All right, so you pulled both lists. And this is a system that is maintained in the normal course of business at the Glynn County Police Department?
Yes, ma'am. It's used by most, I believe, all agencies in Glynn County. If not
All right.
most.
And I think you mentioned its name was Spillman?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And are these documents kept in the ordinary course of business for you to do evaluations on?
Yes, ma'am.
And they're available for you as part of your job as a detective?
Yes, ma'am.
And you can pull them up to do analysis, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And in this case, did I ask you to pull them up out of Spillman independently yourself to perform an analysis?
Yes, ma'am.
And what did I ask you to look at?
The reports, the ones that actually had the reports written for them. So cases that were closed out, active. The best way to say is in our terminology. So an incident report was completed.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and drill down to that. Do people call 911 and then there's nothing really there to it?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. But there's still a 911 call recorded that comes up?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So when you looked at, what I asked you to look at, it was actually a 911 call where there was like kind of something that actually really happened?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So in other words, there was an investigation, somebody looked into something, somebody reported something, and that somebody wrote a report?
For some instances, and then one other instance with a burglary, there wasn't a report.
So there was one burglary that's unfounded?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And that is all of January 1st, 2019 through February 23rd of 2020?
Judge, we're getting into the objectionable material. It's being offered for the truth. Somebody investigated, somebody reported, somebody wrote a report. That information the state is now offering as the truth that either an incident did or didn't take place. She's offering it through this witness that has no direct knowledge of it, and it's being offered for the truth. So if the state wants to do that, call the witnesses who dealt with it.
We join in that objection.
So explain where the state's coming from on it.
Sure.
I didn't hear your
I asked her to explain where the state is coming from on it.
Well, Your Honor, we
Based
would
on the
ask that
objection.
this be done outside the presence of the jury. This is an appropriate.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you could go ahead and take a step outside, or step back into the jury
All right
room.
for the jury. Please be seated.
All right, I'm going to ask if you could just go ahead and take a step outside of the courtroom while we address the matter before the court. from the state.
Thank you, Judge. The only testimony the state is trying to elicit at this point in time is that there was only one burglary call in the entire Satilla Shores neighborhood between January 1st, 2019 and February 23rd, 2020, and it was an unfounded burglary call. In addition, there were only 4 entering auto calls in that time frame, one of which was Travis McMichael's on January 1st, 2020. So the state is entitled to rebut these statements by Greg McMichael about, oh, there's all this crime and he's this suspect. He's already, the statement's already in. Oh, they've got him on video every third or fourth night out there breaking into people's homes. And the reality is that is not the case whatsoever. In this case, it's not hearsay. And the reason it's not hearsay is it's not a statement of another person. This is a computer system. It's business records that are kept in the ordinary course of business. This is an officer who is entitled and actually duty-bound kind of during his investigations to pull these records and look at them. I asked him to pull these records to verify the number and type of call and then to look at the calls that were burglaries and entering autos. So we know exactly what had taken place during this time frame in reality. He's not going to testify to what the victim said or which officer responded or any of those sorts of things. It is strictly to provide the jury with the actual numbers of 911 calls that came in where there was an actual crime that took place.
Yeah, I think if I'm hearing it correctly, Greg McMichael has said there's been burglaries and entering autos in the neighborhood that he's aware of. The state wants to now prove that Greg McMichael is lying and that there really are no burglaries or entering autos that have happened in the neighborhood, or not to the extent that he has told officers his belief of the extent of it. And they intend to do that by having this officer, who has looked at some reports that have been generated that have a conclusion within them. Either a statement by somebody saying some information that has caused it to be reported as a burglar entering auto or not, and then a conclusion by an investigating officer that says the initial call is not sustained or not substantiated, for lack of a better word, meaning the opinion of some individual after investigating this particular call to try to disprove what the state has offered, what the state has offered by Mr. McMichael. They're offering it for the truth. It's hearsay. This witness has no knowledge. This witness did not do the investigation. It's like bringing in a conclusion in a report of drugs in a system or something like that. You have to have the witness who's done it to come testify. It's hearsay as it gets.
Your Honor, the records themselves are kept in the ordinary course of business by a records custodian. This man is not the records custodian. This man did his own search on a system and pulled up some reports. It would be no different, can you hand that to me, please, than us calling our investigator to say, I went through all of the reports to find what had gone on in Satilla Shores during a certain time frame, and look how many things I found. And you would say, I suspect, when the state objected, that's hearsay, Your Honor. You need to either get the certified records from the appropriate certifying agency, or you need to have each of these people come in and talk about their reports. So for that reason, this is not an appropriate way to try to prove what had been going on in that neighborhood.
Your Honor, first of all, I'm concerned, and I think the court has an obligation at some point to inquire. The suggestion that this was not a neighborhood on edge flies in the face of overwhelming evidence, and trying to take cherry-picked information, hearsay information, and bring that in this case, I find troubling. I find it troubling. The state is the one who elicited, unless I missed it, the state's the one eliciting the statements from Greg McMichael about all the crime in the neighborhood. That's not something that any of the defendants did in this case. They brought it in. Now they're impeaching their own witness because they made Mr. McMichael their own witness in this context. with this additional information. I would suggest, with all respect, that's rebuttal information, if and when the McMichaels actually present that defense or that evidence. I think it's inappropriate. And, Your Honor, to allow this at this time is wrong. This isn't the typical case, Your Honor, where you can say you don't know what the evidence is. I cannot remember a case where a judge, sorry for the privilege, has been forced to learn so much of the factual evidence and details of the case in advance of the trial. The court knows exactly what the issue is here. And this cherry picking of information is inappropriate in this context. And we would ask the court to disallow this line of questioning at this time, subject to possibly reconsidering it for rebuttal purposes when it's proper.
That's motion. All right. The objection's overruled. This is the police witness testified to these being records. Yeah, you're not going to hear me that way. I'll just speak up. The witness has testified as a police witness that these are records that he would regularly rely upon as part of his investigation, regularly held records by the Glynn County Police Department in a known system. I do think, though, that there is clarification that's needed when it comes to the records. The way the question was asked, I think, needs to be clarified, because the way it's asked makes it sound like he is testifying as to what actually happened as opposed to simply what his record review was. So with that caveat, the objection is overruled. He's simply relying upon the records that he was provided. As to the accuracy of the records, that goes to weight, and on cross-examination, you can cross-examine him on his knowledge of the records.
You know, I have a second matter I want to take up while the jury's out. And maybe it was a misunderstanding, but Ms. Burton pointed out to me the Bruton issue that had come up. The only thing that I expressed concern about, that I objected to with respect to statements about my client in this statement, the only thing that I'm concerned about, not a concern about all the references to blocking, all the references to trucks, we let all that go. I specifically objected that I did not want Greg McMichael's testimony about his relationship to Roddy Bryan coming into evidence. And there's just one spot. And sure enough, I thought that was covered. And I'm told that, in fact, that was brought in. That's a problem. And if it's late, then it's an ineffective assistance to counsel issue. But I'm making a motion for mistrial under Bruton based on that. In the alternative, I don't know that you can cure it. And here's why, Your Honor. Because I know you're not looking at me. You're not giving me that look yet. But I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, how could that make any difference? How could that be important in this case? It goes back to the severance issue that we talked about before. The state has these before the fact, after the fact conspiracy theories to get around the fact that there were no communications between Roddy Bryan and Greg McMichael prior to the shooting in this case about this matter. And now we've gotten in Greg McMichael's version of his relationship with Mr. Bryan. I can't cross-examine him about that. Now we've got this jail call, and we've talked about that before, jail call looming out there about how Roddy Bryan is Greg McMichael's ally. Again, I can't cross-examine Greg McMichael about any of that. And I'm sure it didn't dawn on the state that, well, yeah, you know what, I'm not assuming anything. But we all know we have another issue with Roddy Bryan's fiancée, because everybody knows that there is no relationship between Greg McMichael and Roddy Bryan, because Greg McMichael is not welcome in the Bryan residence, not because of anything that happened between Mr. Bryan and Mr. McMichael, but because of issues involving his fiancée and her family. Now, how am I going to possibly deal with any of that? The state's putting me in a position, it's forcing me at some point to make a motion for severance, because I can't defend Roddy against allegations of special treatment. I can't defend Roddy against allegations of some special relationship in this case. And I'm not saying they're doing it deliberately, but they're putting me in a box where Roddy Bryan can't get a fair trial without being able to cross-examine Gregory McMichael in this case. Now, if Gregory McMichael testifies, I guess there's no problem. But in the event that Mr. McMichael doesn't testify, then how do I defend Roddy against these charges? That's the problem. I'm making the motion for mistrial, and I'm reserving the right to move for severance.
Objections.
Any of the other defendants joining in the mistrial?
On the Bruton issue that Mr. Goff has raised, no.
No.
First off, objections need to be contemporaneous when it took place, and there was no objection at the time this took place. Number two, this is not an inculpatory statement in any way. People having known each other in this context is absolutely not inculpatory because, as Mr. Goff knows, the evidence is going to come out that they don't have each other's phone numbers in each other's cell phones, okay? And that they didn't know each other like that. And that is evidence the state is going to present. Number two, I think it would be a Bruton violation to put in a jail call where Mr. Gregory McMichael is calling Mr. Bryan an ally. That would be inculpatory. And Mr. Goff keeps asserting that we're going to do conspiracy after the fact. That is not what we're going to go into. Conspiracy after the fact that they, because we don't intend to go into all of the, how about this? The state has no intention at this point in time of going into everything that took place afterwards. If that becomes relevant, it may be gone into, and at that point in time, it may be something to explore exactly how this video got out on the internet and how Mr. Gregory McMichael went to Mr. Bryan and asked for his phone and did all this stuff. But the state has no intention of putting that in its case in chief at all, okay? Because that's not anything that's going to come in my opinion, at this point in time. So all of the paper tigers that Mr. Goff is talking about, the state doesn't intend to put those in. I'm just trying to not box myself in if for some reason it does actually end up being relevant because Mr. Goff puts it in or someone else puts it in. I don't foresee it coming in. So at this point in time, it's inculpatory statements that Bruton violates. And knowing somebody for years, but I'm not sure exactly where he lives in the neighborhood, it does show the nature of the relationship, which is not a close one if you don't even know where the guy lives in the neighborhood.
Well, Your Honor, if the state's going to withdraw the conspiracy charge, then that would change the character of the case.
I just have to add on the after-the-fact conspiracy defense to its case in chief that the state just made. Just yesterday, they elicited from former Officer Minshew on direct examination in their case in chief evidence that after the fact, that is after the shooting, Mr. McMichael was over near his truck talking to Roddy Bryan. And you have to ask, why was that a fact of relevance to the case, if not to suggest, and at this point they're suggesting it, they're humming it, I suspect they'll sing it in closing, that he got up with Roddy Bryan after the shooting to talk about something or other sinister and conspiratorial and let's cover our tracks kind of stuff. In fact, I think that's why they were talking about all the other people Mr. McMichael was talking to on the scene after the fact. If not for that, why bring it in? I don't know what else they could think it was relevant to, unless it's to say later he's trying to fix this case up by talking to people to get himself covered here.
And, oh, sorry.
There's a motion for mistrial before the court.
Yes.
Okay. That is denied. All of this is preparing the ground. At this point, I'm not aware of the issue currently before the court, but it sure sounds like everybody's got a heads up on where this thing could go if, in fact, the state's headed in that direction with the evidence. And I understand what counsel's raising, but at this point, what I'm ruling on is a motion for mistrial based upon a statement that just came in through the state.
Yes, my comments are more in the nature at this point of just record correcting on the assertion by the state that they're not talking about anything after the fact when in fact they are. And the court is correct. It is laying the groundwork possibly for future motions for mistrial from any one or all of these defendants.
And for the record, Your Honor, if I have prematurely assumed things incorrectly, my apologies to opposing counsel.
Now that Mr. Hogue has put this all on the record, I do want to put something on the record. All that activity at the scene happened between the homicide and when they made their statements. And what the state is basically pointing out is that Greg McMichael was putting out his narrative and trying to control the scene, and he did all of that before he made it to talk to Parker Marcy. And so it doesn't necessarily go to after the fact, meaning in May of 2020. That's not the after the fact the state's talking about. The conspiracy after the fact, in the state's mind, is what's happening on the scene that we can see on video of all of this, where they're talking to each other there before they ever make any statements to law enforcement or go down a couple hours later to make their statements. And that is where the state is focused.
And that's relevant to what?
Their veracity and credibility.
All right. Well, we can deal with that, I guess.
And Your Honor, the most important issue for me is, is the court going to break for lunch?
I'd like to get done with at least the direct examination of this witness. How much longer do we have from the state?
We have 4 more pages and several videos.
Sounds like now is going to be a good time. All right. Let's go ahead and get the panel, and we'll let them know we're going to be breaking for lunch.
All right for jury. Please state.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, sort of moving you around to, feels like moving you around for the sake of moving you around. We're going to go ahead and break for lunch, but I have to always make those announcements on the record. So there's a bet going on, wasn't there? What we're going to do is we're going to break for lunch. We're going to break for an hour, so 20 past 1. During the break, again, do not discuss this case amongst yourselves. Don't let anybody discuss it in your presence of hearing. If somebody does, please notify the court, and we'll go ahead and see what we need to address. But with those instructions and all of the other instructions that I have given you, enjoy your lunch. We'll see you back here in an hour. Thank you.
All right for jury.
All right. Sometimes I don't dare ask this question, but anything from the state before we recess?
No, Judge.
From Travis McMichael.
No, Your Honor.
From Greg McMichael.
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Bryan.
No, Your Honor.
All right, we're in recess for an hour.